Antiquity Unveiled, the most marvelous revelations of the 19th century concerning the origin of Christianity, by Jonathan Manning Roberts. And we start Eusebius. And I think this is going to be a 2-video one. I yield under protest. I hate both my moral and spirit life. I acted here, and still do act, a living lie. The prince of interpolators, forgers, and plagiarists now inhabits the organism of this man before you. Curse you and your book, but I will have, I suppose, to get my name in it. I fought these spirit powers during 2 long years before they got me here tonight. I am fast in the net of truth. I am not bad, though I be the forger of the passage in relation to Jesus Christ in Josephus. I merely copied it. Justin Martyr was the man who did that, and his epistle to Antoninus Pius, begging that he would not persecute the Christians on account of the similarity of the Christian with the pagan God. In chapter 2 of my ecclesiastical history, you will find the sentence as near as I can give it through this man. Curse me if I was not watched. I would lie to you. That the epistles and gospels of the ancient Therapeutae are the epistles and gospels of the present day. Well, in general, I would say it would be modeled after them, but... And another thing I was compelled to say in my history was that the gospel of Jesus Christ was neither new nor strange. There is a book extant that will settle this anti-Nicene library question, and what it is and where to find it will be told here tonight by a spirit who will follow me. There is no bishop, archbishop, cardinal, or pope that has not tampered with everything that could throw light upon Christianity. If it had its origin with and was founded by Apollonius of Tyana, and its principal exponent, or one who did most to spread it, according to the manuscripts that I copied from, was Ammonius Saccas. I think from my reading of them that he added the Egyptian Alexandrine element to the Hindu originals. That is, he modernized them to suit the Egyptian schools of thought. All the epistles and gospels are, in reality, the creation of the Christian priests. Some were named as early as the 2nd century, and some not until the 4th century. Well, there was editing going on. Quite a lot of editing until the 4th century of the Common Era. But named, you're the spirit stopped to say, in the first place, I hate to give this communication. He was urged to do it. He was urged to do it without reluctance. He answered, it is a surrender of power. No man likes to give up power. He then resumed his communication. All the Gospels and epistles of Apollonius of Tyana were in what might be termed the Syriac, Hebraic, or Samaritan tongue, and the Greek writers translated them. Yeah, that would be the case if these Greek texts were authentic. Now, given that the Greek texts... So what were the Greek texts rendering? Oh, they were Christianizing something that was not Christian, right? In those early ages, to suit themselves. That that Christianity and paganism were identically the same can be proven very easily by the feast in honor of Adonis or Adonai, which the Christians adopted, that is, the Catholic Christians, which is now their Easter festival. And you can see this at Rome on any Easter day. It requires very learning to see their identity. The original, if there ever was an original, Jesus Christ, was a Hindu god known under the name of Christias, or Krishna, the modern way of spelling it, to disguise the real truth. According to documents that were extant in my day, Christias, or Krishna, was worshipped in the temple of Mathura on the Jumna in the days of Sun Kanyathan, 1200 years BCE, positive evidence of which I think is to be found in some manuscripts of the time of Alexander the Great, still extant 330 BCE. I did not come here tonight to confess anything willingly. I am caught in the web of circumstances, trapped by spirits, who know more than I do. I have confessed only what the power made me confess. I have had to do it. You know my name. We replied, Eusebius of Caesarea. He replied, I am Eusebius of Caesarea, but to me, this is the worst experience I've ever had to undergo. I'd rather have spent 100 years in hell than to have acknowledged what I have done. Well, let's not assume that humanity is so arrogant, but whether it's an 1800s version of the King James Version or 1611, which is almost, I don't even know if they actually reprint any of those or have in the past century for that matter, because it was a bigger book and there were certain things. There's a lot of claims to be the 1611 faithful to, it's not an exact account, but it's faithful to this King James Version. A lot of trickery in that respect. But the King James Version was based on not some of the older Greek, not some of the older Aramea, but a whole new set that did not exist. The so-called Old Testament was not what the Jews had. The Christians came up with their own versions. That the Sepharim, they did not. The Sopharim did not accept these. They picked a number of rows and a number of columns and a number of letters, and they kept to that. There were 3 different versions, but the Christians decided we want our own versions. The Greek text, which the Orthodox Church had, the Protestants used a different Greek text. At our request, the Spirit consented to allow us to make an appeal to him to reconsider his past life as a necessary step to his own happiness, as well as an act of justice to the thousands of millions of spirits who have been kept in darkness, ignorance, and misery, mainly through his dishonest and untruthful inculcations. He heard us with attention and patience, and leaving the control, promised to weigh well what we had said to him, and to return and make known the result. In view of the great importance of the communication, we will give such facts concerning Eusebius as will be told, as will serve to give it its due weight. Of Eusebius, Dr. Lardner says, Eusebius, Bishop of Caesarea in Palestine, says Jerome, a man most studious in the divine scriptures, and together with the martyr Pamphilus, very diligent in making a large collection of ecclesiastical writers, published innumerable volumes, some of which are these: the Evangelical Demonstration in 20 books, the Evangelical Preparation in 15 books, 5 books of Theophany, 10 books of ecclesiastical history, chronicle canons of universal history, and an epitome of them, and of the difference between the Gospels, 10 books upon Isaiah, against Porphyry, who at the same time wrote in Sicily, 30 books, as some think, though I have never met with more than 20. Topics in one book, an apology for Origen in 6 books, the life of Pamphilus in 3 books, several small pieces concerning the martyrs, most learned commentaries on the 150 Psalms, and many other works. He flourished chiefly under his emperors Constantine and Constantius, Constantine and Constantius, yes, on account of his friendship for Pamphilus. He received his surname from him. Eusebius, as is generally thought, and with some degree of probability, was born at Caesarea in Palestine, about the year 270, or as some think, sooner. We have no account of his parents, or who were his instructors in early life, nor is there anything certainly known of his family and relations. It is somewhat probable, though not certain, that Eusebius was ordained presbyter at Agapius, bishop of Caesarea, and of whom he made a very honorable mention. He had a long and happy intimacy with Pamphilus, a presbyter in that church, who was imprisoned in the year 307 and obtained the crown of martyrdom in 309. During the time of that imprisonment, Eusebius was much with his friend. After the martyrdom of Pamphilus, he went to Tyre, where he saw many finish their testimony to Jesus in a glorious manner. From thence, as it seems, he went into Egypt, where too he was a spectator. He was a spectator of the sufferings and patience of many of his fellow Christians, where likewise he seems to have been imprisoned. And because he did not suffer as some others did, it has been insinuated that he procured his library by sacrificing or some other mean compliance unbecoming a Christian. But that is a general accusation without ground. No one was ever able to specify any mean act of compliance in particular, as appears from Potamon's charge in Epiphanius. Agapius succeeded Theotinus in the see of Caesarea, and it is the more general opinion that Eusebius conceded Agapius in 315 of the Vulgar era. This is certain, that he was bishop of Caesarea in 320 at the latest, after which we can perceive that he was present at most of the synods held in that part of the world. He died in the year 339 or 340. So he died before the stage that we would call the Orthodox Church, but there really wasn't the split for hundreds of years. But speaking of Eusebius's ecclesiastical history, Lardner says, of all Eusebius's works, the ecclesiastical history is the most valuable, but as it seems to me, the least accurate of all his large works that are come down to us in any good measure entire. Some faults may be owing to haste, others to defect of critical skill, others to want of candor and impartiality. For our great author, as well as most other men, had his affections. He was favorable to some things and persons, and prejudiced against others. He was a great admirer. He was a great admirer of Origen, in which he was in the right. Nevertheless, he should not have therefore omitted all notice of Methodius, because he was Origen's adversary. He had a great zeal for the Christian religion, and so far undoubtedly he was right. Nevertheless, he should not have attempted to support it by weak and false arguments. Abgarus' letter to our Savior and our Savior's letter to Abgarus, copied at length in our author's ecclesiastical history, are much suspected by many learned men not to be genuine. It is wonderful that Eusebius should think Philos, the Reputa, were Christians, and that their ancient writings should be our Gospels and Epistles. Page 55d. Eusebius supposed Josephus to speak of the enrollment at the time of our Lord's nativity, before the death of Herod the Great, related in Luke 2, 1-4, where, as indeed the Jewish historian speaks of that made after the removal of Archelaus, which is also referred to in Acts 5:37. Our author does justly allege Josephus as confirming the account which Luke gives, Acts 12, of the death of Herod Agrippa, but whereas Josephus says that Agrippa, casting his eyes upward, saw an owl sitting upon a cord over his head, our ecclesiastical historian says he saw an angel over his head. I know not what good apology can be made for this. He transcribes Josephus's account of Theodas as confirming what he has said, Acts 5:36, whereas what Josephus says is reckoned to be a considerable objection against the evangelical history. In the demonstration, he transcribes a passage of Josephus relating to the wonderful signs preceding the destruction of Jerusalem, and then adds, these things, he writes, as happening after our Savior's passion, though they did not happen till about 30 years afterwards. To the like purpose in the Chronicle and the ecclesiastical history, Eusebius transcribes largely the passage of Josephus as giving an account of signs before the Jewish war. Concerning this matter may be seen Joseph Scaliger. If the testimony to Jesus as Jesus Christ has been from the beginning in Josephus' work, it is strange that it should never have been quoted by any ancient apologist for Christianity. And now, in the beginning of the 4th century, he thought so important as to be quoted by our author in 2 of his works still remaining. There is a work ascribed to Porphyry, quoted by Eusebius, in the preparation and demonstration. If that work is not genuine, as I think it is not, it was a forgery of his own time, and the quoting of it, as he does, will be reckoned an instance of want, of care, our skill, our candor, and impartiality. I formally complained of Eusebius for not giving us, at length, the passage of Caius concerning the scriptures of the New Testament are, however, of St. Paul's epistles, but he abridges that, and afterwards transcribes at length several passages of an anonymous writer of little worth, considering the followers of Artemon. It may be reckoned somewhat probable that Eusebius's aversion for Sabellianism and everything akin to it led him to pay so much respect for that author. I add no more at present. Many observations upon this author's works may be seen in Joseph Scaliger's Prolegomena to the Chronicle. Dr. Humann intended to write remarks upon the ecclesiastical history, but did not know that he has published them. So wrote the learned and pious Dr. Nathaniel Lardner concerning the famed ecclesiastical history of Eusebius. From what follows, it will be seen he was equally dishonest and evasive as to the doctrinal views he entertained, says Dr. Lardner. It has often been disputed whether Eusebius was an Arian. It may be proper, therefore, for me to refer to some writers upon this question. And I don't mean Aryan in terms of the Aryavatra, those 5 primal tribes of humanity, but the Aryan sect. Bull vindicates him. There. It may be proper, therefore, for me to refer to some authors upon this question. The ancients were not all of one mind here. Socrates, in the 5th century, inserted an apology for him in his ecclesiastical history. Among moderns, it is needless to mention Baronius, whose antipathy to this writer is well known. Petavius readily places Eusebius among Arians. Bull vindicates him. Cave and Leclerc had a warm controversy upon this head. Cave allows that there are many unwary and dangerous expressions to be found in his writings, that he has, at best, doubtful and ambiguous expressions in his controverted doctrine, and that he was reckoned to be an Arian by Athanasius and diverse others, his contemporaries, as well as others in the latter part of the 4th century, and afterwards. Still, he says, he did not hold the peculiar doctrines of Arianism. Fabricius and Dupin do not much differ from Cave. Valesius, too, was favorable to our author. G.J. Vossius says, his works would sufficiently manifest him to have been an Arian if the ancients had been silent about him. Of the same opinion was James Gothofred. Tillemont. It's clear that Eusebius showed himself to be an Arian by his actions and his writings. Montfaucon says the same thing exactly and earnestly, and at large argues on the side of the question, and that he showed himself to be an Arian as much in his writings after the Council of Nice as before it. As for his subscribing to the Nicene Creed, he supposes that Eusebius was moved by worldly considerations, and that he did not subscribe sincerely, which is grievous to think. Better had it been that the bishops of that council had never met together, than that they should be tempted and prevailed upon a Christian bishop or anyone else to prevaricate and act against conscience. Such is the testimony of Christian writers as to the dishonesty, worldliness, and unfairness of Eusebius as a writer and a Christian bishop. We quote farther from Smith's Dictionary of Greek and Roman Biography. The character of Eusebius and his honesty as a writer have been made the subject of a fierce attack by Gibbon, who accuses him of relating whatever might be redound to the credit, and suppressing whatever would tend to cast reproach on Christianity, and represents him as little better than a dishonest sycophant, anxious for nothing higher than the favor of Constantine, and resumes the subject in his vindication of the 15th and 16th chapters of the history. Gibbon's Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire. It's a book I read when I was, 10 years old? 8? No, was in like 4th or 5th grade. It was an okay book. Better than what they tended to have you read at school. Well, it's 6 books, but I later have I have an abridged version now. But I read that was one of the things that I read at the library. I have a lot of books that I don't possess. A lot of books that I've never possessed, but well, that I've had in my charge, but I didn't own them. Some I was, keep it in the library. Okay, I'll visit the library and read this book, and I'll read other books when I get home. And anyways, for the charge of psychophancy, there's but little foundation. The joy of the Christians at Constantine's patronage of true religion was so great that he was all but deified by them, both before and after his death. And although no doubt Niebuhr has sufficiently shown that Constantine, at least up to the time of his last illness, can only be considered as a pagan. Yet, concerning that his ascension not only terminated the persecution which had raged for 10 years, but even established Christianity as the state religion, it is not surprising that Eusebius, like others, should be willing to overlook his faults, and regard him as an especial favorite of heaven. As to the charge of dishonesty, we would neither expect nor wish a Christian to be impartial to Gibbon's sense. Why not, pray? Yet Eusebius has certainly avowed that he omits almost all accounts of the wickedness and dissensions of the Christians, from thinking such stories less edifying than those which display the excellence of religion by reflecting honor upon the martyrs. Now, there's a difference between the priest, the book, and the congregation, and in some instances, between even the book and the religion itself. The fact that he avows this principle at once diminishes our confidence. That he avows this principle at once diminishes our confidence in him as a historian, and acquits him of the charge of intentional deceit, to which he would have been otherwise exposed. But besides this, Eusebius has written a chapter bearing the monstrous title, How Far It May Be Lawful and Fitting to Use Falsehood as a Medicine for the Advantage of Those Who Require Such a Method. Let me refer to you to the Bible as a whole, but the Bible in terms of St. Paul and Christian lying. I've made a video on that respect. It's elsewhere on the Christian thing. Now, at first sight, and why not second, third, fourth, and any number of other sights, there naturally arises in our minds a strong prejudice against such a person who, being a Christian in profession, could suppose that the use of falsehood can ever be justified. And no doubt the thought was suggested by the pious rods which are the shame of the early Christian church. Now, let me insert here that those who lie or act deceitfully to save their life, I'm not blaming them. I don't want you to think that I'm blaming those that are forced by circumstance. I blame the persecutors. I blame the people who, they said this to save their lives. And it matters. You spend your whole life, we have a chance till we die. Puberty, independent morality, ability to choose otherwise. We go through other changes, 25 to 40. Then we have another change, 35 to 45 till we're about 60 or 70. And then we have a final change. in the way our brain works. But we're accountable, and we're accountable to degrees leading up to that. But we are given the life to make those final good decisions. But don't negate the ones on the way, right? Because how do you expect to do the right thing? But when we read the chapter itself, we find that the instances which Eusebius takes of the extent to which the principles may be carried are the cases in which God is described in the Old Testament as liable to human affections, as jealousy or anger, which is done for the advantage of those who require such methods. We have given enough and more than enough concerning Eusebius to show his real character. We may now proceed to analyze the communication which purports to come from his unwilling and resisting spirit. That this captured spirit should hate to face his work as a mortal and spirit with such a record of evil doing was natural, and that he should make his own confession under protest ought to surprise no one. To realize that he had lived and was still living a lie was anything but a pleasant necessity. That he should curse ourself and our contemplated publication was equally natural, and not less in his fear that his unwilling and truthful spirit testimony would be made known to the world. Some idea of the kind of psychological warfare going on in spirit life may be gathered from the fact that after 2 years of effort, this stubborn and powerful spirit was compelled to yield to a higher psychological force and become a passive witness to the truth. We desire to direct the attention of our readers to the disavowal of the spirit that he forged the passage in relation to Jesus Christ in Josephus' Antiquities of the Jews. It has come to be a general impression among critics that the passage or section referred to by Josephus was forged as well as interpolated by Eusebius. This the spirit denies, so far as the forgery goes, which he charges upon Justin Martyr, who used it in his epistles or apology to Antonius Pius. Whether this be true or false, it is a fact that Justin Martyr did write an epistle to the Emperor Antoninus Pius, speaking of the undisputed works of Justin Martyr. The Clintock and Strong's Cyclopedia says, Apologia prout upir Christenton pros Antonion ton Eusebe, mentioned in the only 2 known manuscripts of the Apologies, and in the older edition of Justin, is one of the most interesting remnants of Christian antiquity. It is addressed to the emperors Antoninus